Let's get to the next chapter. Alright, so we've read Positively Unstoppable, Life at 90%, Failure is Not an Option, and bang, get off the couch. Chapter 4. Your history is not your destiny. Moving beyond your setbacks. 45. Alright, I wonder who he's got in this one. Alright, your history is not your destiny. Moving beyond your setbacks. Every strike brings me closer to the next home run. Babe Ruth. Okay, now that you're all in, let's talk about giving up. Wait, what? Yeah, my friend, this is a dangerous time. It really is. The beginning is hard. I know you've given up before. Once you start to make progress, there are a lot of pitfalls that can cause a person to give up too soon. A couple of days ago, you were eating that Whopper value meal, or the General Tso's chicken with the egg roll and the fried rice. That was mine. And telling yourself you'd work out tomorrow, but suddenly, bang, today is tomorrow. Tomorrow's here and you've got to put in the work. The art of owning it means changing a ton of old habits that have held you back. And in the early days, it can feel overwhelming. Trust me, once new habits are formed, you'll feel like a different person. Garbage food and laziness didn't make you happy, but they were easy. Sure, you felt bad enough to put down a chunk of change for a book about owning your life, but you were comfortable in your unhappiness. If this is going to really make a difference in your life, you're going to have to think differently. Perhaps in the past you've given up when you didn't see immediate results, or you've fallen off track for a day, maybe more. Not this time. Don't anticipate giving up or failing, but instead plan for some setbacks that you know you will have to overcome. You know, there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be that first plateau. There's going to be that first party. There's going to be that first barbecue. I love barbecue, and I can show you how to make barbecue your own. He showed me how to do all this stuff. Maybe you've told yourself, I've tried this already. I can't change. It's hopeless. Okay then. This is a pretty thick book. It might make a great doorstop. Hey, no. I wrote this fucking thing for you. Look, it's okay to fall down. I fall down too. But falling down doesn't mean you're finished. We're all going to fall. Fail and fuck up now and then. That doesn't mean we have to live that way. Failure is not a life sentence. Say that again. Failure is not a life sentence. Falling down is a moment, that's all. And like every other moment in your life, you can make it work for you if you believe in yourself. Have the nerve and put in the work to stand up again. I keep repeating these things because owning it and believing in yourself is a 24/7 job. It's a lifelong project and it's hard as hell. You know I don't know that? You think I don't know that? I invented Diamond Dallas Page when I was in my 30s, and I keep inventing him every single day of my life. I'm not Mr. Positive all the time. The little everyday shit that bogs everyone down can drag me down too. Sometimes I fail, but after a ton of hard-won knowledge and experience, I know that failures are opportunities to learn and grow. I know that no matter what problems creep up, minor or major, I have it pretty damn good. A setback is the most common excuse to quit when what it should really do is propel you forward. You'll stumble sometimes when you leave your safe space. Reading a whole book out loud isn't exactly easy. Kudos to them actors and professional readers. You'll stumble sometimes when you leave your safe space, and that's natural. It's foreign ground, and you haven't walked there before. But what you never do is run back to your bubble. No, you get up, you move forward. Yeah. What's that even mean, move forward? Okay, let me explain it. You know that part of your personality that buries your best intentions just because you screw up occasionally? That part of you that always wants to tell yourself, I'm so stupid, or that constantly asks, why did I do that? Well, that self-doubting part of your personality is always lurking somewhere inside of you. You're not a sociopath, but you have to learn how to respond to it. The first rule is the simplest, though it might also be the hardest to achieve. Don't quit. The mistake most people make is that they assume very successful people haven't failed much in their lives. That couldn't be further from the truth. Failure is the part of the path that leads to growth. It makes us think and it makes us appreciate what we accomplish when it finally happens. Do you know how many failed attempts Thomas Edison made before he invented a commercially viable light bulb? 10,000. He could have given up after 200 failed attempts, 500. When he was asked about it, Edison said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Now that's how you take a negative and turn it into a positive. So many people stop pursuing their goals after experiencing failure, big or small. Maybe you got all your workouts in and have eaten clean, and yet you still gained a pound. Is that a reason to give up? So that you can gain even more? So that you can feel even worse? You're on a road. You can't know exactly where you are every step of the way, and that means you can never stop moving forward. You've got to persevere. In Napoleon Hill's classic bestseller, Think and Grow Rich, Hill tells the story of a man who spent weeks drilling during the gold rush until he finally struck a vein. He was so excited by the discovery that he rented more machinery and began drilling deeper. He mined a good amount of gold, but all of a sudden there was nothing left. After more drilling turned up zero pay dirt, he decided to sell the land. He just gave up. Guess how far this guy was from finding millions of dollars worth of gold? 3 feet. The man who bought the land hired an engineer who knew more about mining, and they found the payoff vein right under where the first guy's ass had been. Your success, whether it's in your career, your health, or relationships, is not dependent on avoiding failure. You'll fail, probably a bunch of times. It's about how persistent you are that makes the difference. How willing you are to pick yourself back up when you get knocked down. It took over a decade before anyone really knew what DDP yoga was. Hell, I could have given up after 8 years and had zero to show for it. Thank God I didn't. Thank God you didn't, man. When I was 12 years old, I had to give up 2 of the things I loved most in the world, football and hockey. The adrenaline, speed, physicality, and rush I felt when playing these sports was amazing. I was just a tall, skinny kid in my first Pop Warner season, but in my mind I was going to be a defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys. That was my mindset. Yeah, I didn't look like I had the makings to play in the NFL or NHL, but anybody can dream, you know? I really thought I had what it took, and I was working hard to build my skill set. Well, one snowy, rainy, slushy morning with the sleet about 3 inches thick on the ground, I ran out onto Route 88 in Point Pleasant, New Jersey to catch the school bus, and a car slammed into me. The fender smashed into my right knee, my face bounced off the hood, and I flew 42 feet from the point of impact. For a working class kid in 1968, there was no such thing as rehab or physical therapy. At the hospital, they just sewed up my leg, put it in a cast, and sent me back to my grandma's house. When I went back to the doctor to have the cast removed, I saw that he had made an incision in my leg that looked like a giant fucking fish hook. He took one look at his handiwork and said, "You're never going to play football or hockey again. No more contact sports." I was devastated, but I wasn't going to take his word for it because as far as I was concerned, he didn't know shit. So the next time my mom came to visit, I begged her to take me to see this guy, Dr. Nicholas. He was a pretty prominent cat, a surgeon known for his work with the Jets, Knicks, and Rangers. I had seen him on TV talking about the work he'd done on Joe Namath's and Willis Reed's knees. So what did this genius have to tell me? I'll never forget it. "You're never going to be able to play," he said. "You're never going to be Joe Namath or Willis Reed. You need to start hitting the books and forget about football and hockey." Big shot doctor or not, who the hell was he to tell me who I am not going to be? That's a big reason why even to this day, I never let anybody tell me what I can't do. That determination definitely got ingrained in me. Back then, though, there was nothing I could do about it, at least not that I knew of. I just remember sitting there in his office and crying. It was that angry, burning kind of crying. I was like, "Are you really telling me this? I thought you were the man. This is a man who worked on Joe Namath. Sure, I was just a kid, but how dare he decide my future for me?" Right, I was just a little Page Joseph Falkenberg, a nobody, just a little kid. I really felt for a while that I was not only nobody, but that I had nobody, nothing. The easy thing would have been to just wallow in that crap, but I didn't. Maybe it was that old survival instinct of mine, my willingness to adapt, or maybe it was out of a sense of defiance, which is pretty much the same thing, but something in me made me move forward. The first thing I had to figure out was, what am I going to do? Once they told me I had to drop full contact sports, I was left with baseball or basketball. I sucked at both. Basketball I could figure out much more easily than baseball because I didn't need anybody else to play. I could practice layups and hooks, foul shots and jumpers and rebounds all by myself. I could do everything. Sure, you can't practice passing and defense on your own, but almost everything else you can do in a regular game you could learn by yourself. Because I often didn't get picked for the schoolyard games when I was first learning the basics, I'd go over to a basket no one was using and practice on my own. I hadn't even made the team in 7th grade, but I didn't give a crap because I was still playing hockey and football. But in 8th grade I cared a lot because suddenly it was all I had. I made the team that year after a ton of practice on my own, but I pretty much sat on the bench all season. At the end of it I was like, that's never going to happen to me again. That's when I really learned what work ethic is all about. I went down to the park and I would play 5 hours a day, every day. Rain, shine, cold, it didn't matter. This one time I had a bloody nose, I played for hours anyway. That almost got me killed. I was using my t-shirt to sop up the blood, and when it came time to leave, I went home with another guy's t-shirt and left him the bloody one by mistake. He wanted to kick my ass for that. By the time freshman year came around, I was a starter and went undefeated. In my sophomore year, I started for the varsity team after I finally cut my hair. I would go on to become all-county, which was a pretty big deal. For me, it was the equivalent of my first major title, the TV championship title. It proved that all hard-ass work was starting to pay off. People were starting to notice. The point is, and I'll say it again, you're going to fall down. It's inevitable, but you don't have to stay down. Every setback presents an opportunity once you learn to see the patterns. Now, does that mean the road was clear from there on in? Come on, what book have you been reading? Achieving anything worthwhile depends on your ability to get back up after you've been knocked down. It's a mindset you have to adopt. Failure is an opportunity, not an ending. I'm going to say that again. Failure is an opportunity, not an ending. Look at any story that inspires you, whether it's the fictitious story of Rocky Balboa or the true story of disabled veteran Arthur Borman. See page 23. These stories inspire us because they confirm in our minds that the underdog can't prevail against insurmountable odds and setbacks. This is the foundation of inspiration, and I'm telling you, I have experienced this over and over again in my life. Either you can stay down and feel sorry for yourself when life knocks you down, or you can remind yourself of how badly you want something and get the hell back up. I'll quote Albert Einstein 100 times. It's not that I'm so smart, I just stick with the problem longer. Do you want to be the guy who quits when he's 3 feet from striking gold? Of course not, so don't. Remember, greatness is often defined by how many times you're willing to fail and try again. People often self-sabotage because they don't think they deserve to succeed. They could have come from someone making them feel worthless when they were children. Even as adults, we have to be careful of others who try to make us feel like we're unworthy of success or happiness. I've had people whom I know and like tell me they feel worthless. That's fucked up. It goes back to the story you tell yourself. People who say I have no willpower, I'm a comfort eater. If this is you, it's time to change your story. And I'm telling you, I know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to feeling like you should throw in the towel. No matter what shape you're in physically, emotionally, intellectually, if you stay committed to change, you're going to see little progressions. You're going to see small differences in your flexibility, your physiology, and your core strength. Be patient. Give yourself time to pay attention to all the small achievements because they add up over time. The most important changes are the consistent ones, the ones that may seem small at first, but which you can repeat and improve upon. Because change is not an event. It's so easy for people to beat themselves down over the slightest failure or setback. So you'd really better give yourself full fucking credit for every single win. Change, healing, it happens in steps. It's a process. Understand that I'm not talking to you from atop some mountain. Everything I'm saying here, I still work at it every single day. But every day brings me something new to help push me forward if I know how and where to look. It's normal to want to give up after a failure, but you must resist this urge. and realize you're going to have days when things feel impossible. That's okay, just as long as you don't give up. Next story is Stacy's story. So we're going to go over Stacy's story. I chose DDPY because the success stories are not just a one-off, two-off, fluke thing. The success stories are real. And you can talk to and communicate with every single one of them, including DDP. DDPY success story, Stacy Morris. Stacy Morris is a friend of mine who spent most of her life struggling with her weight. In fact, before she came to DDP Yoga, she had lost more than 100 pounds and gained it back twice. Talk about setbacks. Then she finally learned that she needed to change her mind, not just her diet. Here's her story. It's so important to change your mind. Stacy. It started in early childhood. I really was not a fat kid, but I was bullied by kids. I was bigger and taller than some of the boys, and they called me fat. Eventually, I became the names that I was called. That's where it began. I actually did become fat because I ate to comfort and console myself. That turned into a decades-long cycle. For me, dieting only backfires. It just made me more frustrated, more hungry. It just exasperated everything. But dieting was the only tool we had at the time. I grew up in the 70s and there just weren't a lot of real solid answers. When I got into my 20s, maybe because I had the energy and the will, that's when I lost 100 pounds twice. The missing element was that I was always told by society and by everybody that if I just lost weight, I would finally be okay and I would finally be happy. The 2 times that I lost 100 pounds, I was only working on my exterior. I did nothing for my low self-esteem or the pain that I was in. There I was, finally thin, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you're supposed to be happy now," but I wasn't. I was still the inadequate fat girl inside. I was literally worn out by the whole thing. People were judging me for my weight and for what I ate, so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to take this whole equation and throw it away. I knew I needed to work on my self-esteem, so I went to 12-step programs. I went to therapy. I read self-help books and I worked on myself, on the self-esteem that I was never given as a child. Then I just decided I'm not going to worry about what I'm eating. It sounds very counterintuitive, but that's what I needed. After a lifetime of being scrutinized, I couldn't have done it any other way. However, I really wasn't paying attention to that weight that I was putting on. When I graduated from high school, I was probably about 210 or 220. Before I found DDP Yoga, I was 345. That was really shocking to me, and I didn't like that. I was just kind of stuck in this pattern because anything that you build up into a habit becomes a very strong vortex. Food is extremely comforting, and I hadn't really learned any proper coping mechanisms. But I'd done all this work on my self-esteem, and the good news was that even though I was 345 pounds, I finally got it. It didn't mean that I was a lousy human being. It just meant I was larger than most human beings, but I no longer attached a moral value to it. At the same time, I had pretty much given up. I toyed with getting bypass surgery, and something in me said, no, don't do it. By the end of 2008, I had literally made peace with my size, and I thought, you know, there are people out there who don't have any arms and legs, and I'm just going to stop complaining about this. That's it, once and for all. A couple of weeks later, I was watching Oprah, and there was Carney Wilson talking about a man named Dallas who helped her lose weight. I had never seen Carney look as good. She was radiant and happy and thin. She's always been up and down with her weight, and she looked just phenomenal. So I immediately went to the computer thinking, if this man can help Carney, he can help me. Because Carney and I had similar stories. We were both fat kids who grew into obese adults. I guess it's just in my nature, but I always like to be learning and I always like to be moving forward. Even when I couldn't do anything about the weight, I was working on my inside and working on my self-esteem and traveling and enriching myself. I just thought, well, okay, if there's no answer to the weight problem, maybe I can still have a fulfilling life. I think because I really didn't throw in the towel, I never became one of those people who just stayed at home and sat on the couch and ate. I would go out to restaurants and eat. I would travel and eat. I think because of that energy I was putting out there into the world, eventually I was bound to come upon this solution. And this time it was different. It was different because I didn't look at it as a diet. and it wasn't presented to me as a diet. Even though Dallas does give everybody suggestions and guidelines with regard to food. And it was great that he gave me the freedom of choice. He said, I really think you should eliminate gluten and cow dairy and watch certain things. He didn't tell me what to eat, which again would have backfired. I knew I had to come up with it on my own, and that's what I tell people that I coach. You have to individually work with your preferences, the things you love and the things that you hate. There's no instantaneous answer. You wouldn't believe some of the things I tried, how controlling they are. You have to weigh and measure. You have to call your sponsor and tell them what you're going to eat the day before. It's ridiculous. That was important because people who have eating issues and weight issues, I think, are insidiously told that they can't be trusted with food and that they need to be told what to do. It's so not true. Our bodies are extremely intelligent, and I learned how to reconnect with what my body wanted. When it was hungry, whether it was craving protein or fruit or whatever, I had to relearn that, and it takes time. I came to Dallas's program feeling really, really, really down in the dumps because I had no idea that my weight had gotten so out of control. I was kind of in denial. You know how an anorexic's perception of themselves is distorted in that they think they're fat? I had the opposite. I thought, I am not that fat. I didn't think I was skinny, but I didn't think that I was that big. And when reality came crashing down, Dallas told me to take pictures, and I looked at them. Oh my God, I was just floored. What I'm getting to is I did not feel great about myself. I had a long way to go in terms of weight loss, but through DDP Yoga, I surrounded myself with a positive online community of people who were cheering me, applauding me, encouraging me, and not judging me. Sometimes it takes a whole village. It's not always weight loss. Some people are in chronic pain. Some people have had surgery and they're trying to bounce back. You tell your little spiel or you ask for help. I asked for help. I asked for suggestions. I would say stuff like, you know what? I just took my pictures and I'm feeling lousy about myself. And people would say, hey, tomorrow is a new day. It's one step at a time. Don't be hard on yourself. You're doing this. We've got your back. From there, as I changed my life, I started reaching out and helping other people. It was kind of a strange transition because I've always been the one down on my back seeking a hand up. And when I realized people were asking me for help, I had to really be willing to let go. I was always the screw up. That was a label I took on. I was always the fat screw up. I had to realize it was time to let that go. I'm no longer that person. We've all been there. Just stop beating yourself up. Dallas always says it's not the fact that you've fallen down, it's that you get back up. I've fallen and gotten back up many, many times. Falling down doesn't mean it's over. With that black and white mentality, sometimes it's easy to trick yourself into feeling it's over. I feel like I'm there to pull people out of that trance if they want it. If this were easy, there would be nobody on the planet with any weight issues. Falling down or slipping up, that's part of the process. That's what I would really like to get clear. It doesn't mean you failed or that you're weak or something's wrong with you. It's just part of the learning. Sometimes a person can be on a real high and everything's going great. I've had this happen myself, and life throws them a curve. Somebody dies unexpectedly. You have a tragedy. You lose a job or something, and that can throw your game off. I've had experiences where I still turn to food for comfort, but I know that's just normal. I no longer go into this state of oblivion. I'm still aware. If you just maintain that awareness, you will realize this in life. We're not meant to be perfect. Nobody walks an even path all the time. Life doesn't work that way. I finally realized that, and it took me years. Alright, I actually can't remember if I showed the beginning picture of her, so let's go back to that. Save my page, hopefully. Alright. When I was first coming up in the business, Jake the Snake Roberts was one of the top 5 biggest names in pro wrestling. The man had it all. The looks, the moves, the way he could work, the microphone without even raising his voice. The guy was a total original. He was also one of the few people who saw something special in me when nobody even knew my name. I mean, seriously. If it wasn't for Jake believing in me, I don't know how far I would have gone. It's one of the reasons why I believe in so many people today. Because when somebody else believes in you, you don't want to let them down. It forces you to believe in yourself. Don't ever underestimate the power you can give someone else by believing in them. It's one of the most powerful things in the world. While Jake was an icon to millions, myself included, he was also my brother and my mentor. And that's why I was truly crushed when drugs and alcohol took him down hard. By 1999, there were already stories coming out that he was a crack addict. In 2008, a gossip site posted a video of Jake performing for a circuit crowd of just 700 people in Lakewood, Ohio. Fat and looking old as hell, he could barely stumble through the ropes. It only got worse from there. By the end of the match, he was just a mess, mumbling at himself, cursing out the crowd, with his fat belly hanging way out past his waistband. The guys who set up the match told me later that they'd found 22 empty airline bottles of vodka in his dressing room. Who knows how much he had to drink before he even got to the venue. In 2012, about a year after he officially retired, I reached out to him by telephone. A few weeks later, I went with my business partner and documentary filmmaker Steve Yu to see Jake at the rundown shack where he was living in Texas, and found a guy who was pretty much waiting to die. He was 307 pounds, which put him at 60 pounds over his prime wrestling weight. And the place was so small you couldn't even raise your arms over your head without hitting the ceiling. You could smell the stink of liquor coming off of him. To see my friend and teacher looking like that was a fucking gut punch. Right off, I asked him how long it had been since he'd done drugs. He said, "Alcohol? No, I mean coke, crack." He told me, "A month? A month." I thought to myself, it might as well have been yesterday. I was not very optimistic after hearing this because I knew just how bad it could get with Jake. Booze and drugs. Steve, on the other hand, had no clue. I was pretty sure we'd just do a few DDP yoga positions and Steve and I would be on our way. End of story. Jake told me later that he was ashamed to have me see him like that, and actually pretty pissed off that I'd bring in some stranger with a camera to film it all. If I'd thought more about it, I might not have done it that way, but some things are just meant to be. I think pissing him off with the camera really fueled Jake to show me what he could still do. Well, the workout nearly killed him. It's totally low and no impact, but his whole body was in a state of atrophy. Still, I taught him modifications, and despite one setback after another, and despite his body failing him again and again, he kept at it. He put the work in. After 6 weeks, he had dropped 20 pounds. That show of determination helped me make up my mind. Jake was going to be a full-time project. I sent him a ticket to Atlanta and invited him to live in my home. No, I wasn't going to save him. I was going to give him whatever tools I could to help him save himself. I knew that if Jake could save himself, he could maybe save thousands of other people through the power of his example. I mean, he didn't just need to lose weight, he needed a complete overhaul of his whole life. What bigger challenge was there in the world? The project meant I'd have to bet on myself, on my belief, 100%. If I couldn't do that, what was the point? Everyone thought I was out of my mind. But then again, this wouldn't be the first time. I was encouraged that first day because even down as low as he was, Jake was still incredibly present. He wasn't playing around with denial, blaming other people. One of the first things he said to us was, "I had a life, but I poisoned it. Self-destructive son of a bitch." The first week that Jake moved in, he was unbelievable. He helped with everything. He couldn't do enough things. He was working so hard. It was like he'd gone back to being an all-American kid, the perfect student. He was washing the freaking dishes. He was so good, so positive that first week that Steve came up to me and said, "This is all pretty amazing, what's happening with Jake, but it seems too easy, without a struggle. This documentary won't inspire people." And I looked at him, I just laughed and said, "Remember you said that." He goes, "What do you mean?" "Remember you said that," I repeated. "You don't know Jake Roberts. Yeah, he's doing awesome right now, but he could fall at any moment." That day, Jake left for an autograph session in Jersey. The very next day, while I was on the phone with somebody, Steve walked up to me with a camera. Jake was supposed to be flying back to Atlanta from an autograph signing, and I could sense that something was wrong. "You got a camera in your hands," I said. "What's the problem?" "Jake's been drinking at the airport," Steve said. "He's a mess." "Seriously?" I said, "It's only been a fucking week." The frustration going through my head while we drove to the airport was immense. I knew that no one in my house and our crew was going to let Jake slide, but Jake's people, they were never going to stop him from doing anything or make him see the other side of it, like one of us could. Even though I had predicted this relapse, it was still pretty disappointing that it happened after Jake had been doing so great. It was one of our many lessons when it came to addiction. It's always there, ready to come out. When we found him by the baggage claim, he was fucked up drunk. The guy had no shoes on, and he was in that whole mindset of, I'm sober, what the fuck? Once I got him in my SUV, I called him out. You're sober? I said. Then where the fuck are your shoes? My feet are fucked up, he tells me. I was like, what the fuck? If your feet are fucked up, then you carry your shoes, I shouted. These are the conversations you have with addicts. It's through the goddamn looking glass. Meanwhile, the dude is trying to jump out of my SUV at an intersection. He started exclaiming, I had 2 beers, I had 2 beers. Then I had 3 beers. Then I had 2 beers. But I also had these other beers. It was like he was trying to negotiate, but he couldn't remember the truth from one second to the next. And I was watching him out of the corner of my eye thinking, oh my God. He was embarrassed. He was ashamed. He started yelling at me, punch me. Punch me in the fucking face. He wanted to be punched because he knew he'd messed up. He hated himself in that moment. We actually thought Jake would run, that he would give up and leave because that was his pattern. He'd mess something up and then disappear because he couldn't face up to the shame. How many of us have done that? Again, it's that story you tell yourself. I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? That was the whole thing. When we were filming, Jake never looked at any of the material. He trusted me that what we were putting out there to grab the people's attention, and obviously Steve was right. The conflict, the darkest part of Jake's shame, it made people react in a positive way. Maybe when people hit rock bottom, they can almost let go and be open to change. How much worse can it get? These are the times to forget about past failures and try something different. We can't help but see ourselves in Jake's worst moments. Not his worst, really, but his most honest. After that first breakdown, he told me that he'd been sexually abused by his stepmother and emotionally abused by his father. I was never good enough, he said. I never felt worthy. How do you get it? Now you get it? That's coming from my personal hero. This man who had everything and pissed it all away. So come on, can you move forward from a setback? Can you own it? And no, this isn't some AA-inspired competition where we sit around debating who's had it worse. We've all had it. We all have it. Show me someone who hasn't internalized their pain in the most self-destructive ways, and then tell me what the color of the sky is on that fucking planet. The next morning, Jake said, I'm good. I'm not going to drink anymore. And he seemed sincere. Before that, he had his 3-beer rule. He figured that if he could just stick to 3 beers, he was good. He thought he had it under control. Then, the next thing you know, he lost it. So for Jake, his owning that the next day was the beginning. It was the first time Jake didn't slink off with his tail between his legs. Instead, he said, I'm not running away from this. Because that would have been the normal thing for him to do. But he didn't run away from it. He stood up. He didn't give in to the shame of the previous fuck-up. He took a step forward. As hard as it was for us, we got better at helping Jake overcome his shame. We didn't focus on what he did wrong, but instead on what we could do to prevent it from happening again. I got a crash course in helping someone I loved overcome an addiction, and it was way fucking harder than I could ever imagine it could be. Jake didn't let one failure lead to another. He didn't quit. Jake was always good with his words, which was one of the things that made him so great in our business. And one day, early in his recovery, he told me one of the most powerful things I ever heard anyone say. My history is not my destiny. How is he doing now? He's amazing. When he came here the first time, we had to clear out all the liquor from the house. But these days, and he stays here all the time, he's got his own room for when he passes through town on his speaking tours. The liquor cabinet is full, and it's not even an issue. He's still a curmudgeonly ass. Could you imagine that? Hell yeah. But he's got the kind of sense of humor about his life that comes from owning it. Will he experience more setbacks? Maybe. Will he destroy them? I'm sure they won't. Will they destroy him? I'm sure they won't. Will he destroy them? I'm sure he will. The next time Jake was scheduled to leave the safety of my house and my crew after his fuck up at the airport was a few weeks later on. The next time Jake was scheduled to leave the safety of my house and my crew after his fuck up at the airport was a few weeks later for a weekend autograph signing in Las Vegas, of all places. He was so nervous about staying clean that he booked himself for an alcohol and drug test when he got back to Atlanta that Monday. "I'm scared," he said as he packed his bags, "but I'll make it." You can see the whole story for yourself in the film The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. When you do, you'll understand that fear is normal, and fear is healthy. It keeps us away from fire and the dark alleys, and for sane people, from snakes. But you have to recognize it to look it in the face and own it. Keep your fear rationally. Let it serve you and not paralyze you. After his breakdown, I asked Jake to level with me. I asked him the first question I ask everyone. What do you want? You know what he told me? I want to be free. So again, what do you want?